only thing we don't have as much as England or any other top nation is the experience. But skill-wise, there is no doubt, because if someone from Nepal can go up to the cricketing world and play different franchise league around the world, then...
It's getting hot out there. Let's check on the weather.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
Well, the heat begins ramping up today as hot air from the near continent begins to spread northwards. The humidity will increase as well, making the nights warm and muggy. An amber heat warning comes into effect early tomorrow morning as temperatures look set to reach the early to mid-30s Celsius. So it's a mostly dry start to the day, but a few showers in the far northwest. For most of us, there'll be some good spells of sunshine, but eastern counties will see a little bit more in the way of cloud. Some of that cloud will be thick enough to give a few showers. England and Wales will see temperatures in the mid to high 20s with a daytime high of 30 degrees Celsius in the southeast. Scotland and Ireland will be sunny, but a little bit cooler and fresher. The risk of a shower or two persists in the east through the afternoon, but it'll be dry and hot elsewhere. And it's going to be a mild and rather sticky night for the southern half of the country, with a tropical night for some of us.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
It is reported that Sir Keir Starmer is likely to announce that he's standing down tomorrow. If that's true, we'll soon have had 6 Prime Ministers in just 10 years. To misquote Brenda from Bristol, You're joking. Not another one. Burnham signalled that he's ready to lead, but the chance may come sooner than he thinks. The story from number 10, they're getting on with the job. There's no contest. Literally nothing to see here. What everybody else is saying, Starmer, isolated, abandoned. No longer whether he stands down, just when. This morning, the calm before the storm. Have we entered the endgame of Sir Keir Starmer's premiership after just 2 years? The Business Secretary, Peter Kyle, is in the studio. For the Tories, one big Scottish game, one Mancunian lost deposit. We'll ask Shadow Chancellor Sir Mel Stride whether the old two-party system still has life in it yet. And he's the man who swapped David Cameron's Downing Street for the Golden State. Steve Hilton is the Republican candidate for California's governor. Is Trump's seal of approval a kiss of death these days? We'll hear from him later. Plus, with us throughout the show, the New Statesman's editor-at-large, Andrew Marr. The Eye's political editor, Caroline Wheeler. And the Spectator's editor, Lord Gove. Welcome to Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips. Makerfield matters, no doubt about it. And Andy Burnham's victory was proof of his political pulling power, in Manchester at least. He won more votes than all his opponents put together. But let's not go overboard and overinterpret the result. Unless Labour's High Command has found a way of cloning the former mayor, he won't be contesting the other 649 seats at the next general election. Even if they did find a way of cloning him, there's no guarantee that his appeal would spread from the northwest to the rest of the nation. And to be honest, we still don't know much about what he would actually do in number 10. He basically ran under the slogan, "Vote Andy, get rid of Starmer." Nonetheless, I think the by-election last Thursday does carry some important lessons for the future. First, Burnham's victory and the Tory win in Aberdeen South may be evidence that in the right hands and in the right places, there could yet be life in both the Labour and Tory brands. That said, it looks like the days of the Labour-Tory duopoly in British politics are drawing to a close. Makerfield became a two-way contest between Labour and Reform. In Aberdeen, the fight was between the Tories and the SNP. The next general election could look less like a single contest between two national parties and more like 650 individual races involving 5 different parties. Not that general elections seem to matter as much as they used to. If Burnham does succeed, there will be 10 individuals alive who have held the office of Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, more living ex-heads of government than at any time in our history. And here's the thing. 7 of them, Major, Brown, May, Johnson, Truss, Sunak and possibly Burnham, will initially have risen to the highest office in the land without anyone bothering to ask the voters what they thought. Democracy. Don't you love it? Well, part of that democratic process is this Sunday round. This morning's offering, the Business Secretary. I spoke to Peter Kyle just before we came on air. Peter Kyle, have you spoken to the Prime Minister since Friday?
No.
And why not?
Oh, because we had a very detailed conversation on Friday.
Ah.
I won't go into the details of it. It was a private and a personal conversation. What I will say was that the Prime Minister was calm, he was thoughtful, he led the conversation. I'm saying these things because I've read a lot of things about this conversation that bear no resemblance to what it was actually like. And repeatedly, the Prime Minister asked about the country. Not once in that conversation, which was a lengthy conversation, did he ever ask about self-interest. It was always about the country. And I think that is the tone of the conversation I had with him. It was frank, And I think that is the mindset that the Prime Minister is in as he goes into this weekend, through which he has been working very hard as Prime Minister, as he always does, but also trying to make time to reflect on the political challenges of the moment.
You say this was a frank conversation. By the way, who called who first?
Oh, I have no idea how these things get meant. He was in my diary and I went to see him.
OK.
I mean, these are meetings with the Prime Ministers and the Secretaries of State. We have teams that coordinate things.
You said he was calm and so on and so forth, and he talked about the interests of the country. Do you think that he thinks it is now in the interests of the country that he should stand down?
All I think is that all I know for fact is that he has been engaging in conversations with a wide range of people, including myself, and that he is, as well as working really hard over this weekend, I think he is making time to reflect on the political realities, challenges and opportunities that he finds himself in. You know, I think that is what people would expect him to be doing at this moment in time.
More than 100 of your MPs have called on him to go. Do you think yourself that it is in the interest of the country that whatever the justification, the success, not success, and so on, that for the country's stability, certainty, that it is time for Keir Starmer to relinquish office?
I know this is really frustrating for your viewers to hear this. I had a very frank conversation with the Prime Minister about all of these issues and much more on Friday. My priority, when I think what my role is in putting the country first, is to uphold the authority of this government to make sure that we can govern through a moment of political challenge and that we are 100% focused on delivering. And, you know, just in the last week when I've worked hard to get the implementation of the India trade deal off the ground and worked with Rolls-Royce to get deals across the line for small modular reactors, which we sold to Sweden. All of these things, this is a government that is still working hard, that is still delivering, and the growth figures and other economic figures underscore that. But I am not going to use this time as a Secretary of State for the moment and the time that I have it to make sure that I'm upholding the authority of the government and not engaging in the speculation, which I know is out there. I think people expect me to be cracking on with the job.
Your point is about authority. And, of course, you want to exercise authority as, in a sense, our spokesperson with much of the rest of the globe and so on. Lord Faulkner said a couple of days ago that the Prime Minister has no further authority because of reasons that we all know. At the G7 meeting with other leaders, no doubt people like Keir Starmer, but you couldn't tell, and we know from the reports, that other world leaders think that he is on his way out. Surely, right now, by your own standards, if you want to preserve the authority of the government, that the first thing is that the leader who has no longer authority needs to say, I understand that, I set out a timetable to leave. Did you say that to him?
Well, firstly, as I said before, I'm not going to say what I said in the meeting because it was a personal and private meeting.
Yeah, but this is a matter of public interest. This is a matter of the country, isn't it?
What I don't accept is the fact that the Prime Minister still has no authority and is not able to execute the job as a Prime Minister. At that G7 meeting, he had several meetings, or at least two that I know of, with Prime Minister Modi. And thanks to those meetings, we got the implementation of the India trade deal across the line, which, believe me, was a really tricky moment because there were some outstanding issues that he had to negotiate in order to get that across the line. He got it across the line. That's just one example of what he achieved at the G7, leader to leader. You don't do that unless you have respect and you have authority. So he is doing the job. He is doing so with authority. And he's also doing it because government is more than one person. So the actions that I am taking, putting the country first, trying to uphold the authority of this government, also contributes to this sense that this is a government that will learn the lessons of the Tories in government, where every time they had a moment of political challenge, they descended into acrimony, infighting and chaos. We must learn those lessons, and that's why I'm acting in the way that I am, to do everything I can do to uphold Keir's authority as Prime Minister and make sure we are a government that can and does do things through a moment of political challenge.
You want to act to uphold his authority. So are you telling us that the reports that we read this morning, that he plans to announce his resignation tomorrow, are not true?
I have nothing to believe that they are true. I'm seeing a lot of speculation out there. The only thing I can say with fact is that the Prime Minister is hard at work, as he is every day. He is one of the most hard-working people I've ever come across. And today, as in every other day I've ever known Keir, he is out there working hard. At the same time, he is also trying to create the space where he can think and reflect on the political realities and challenges and the opportunities that lie before us.
Does that mean that you don't know if he plans to resign, or you think he does not plan to resign?
Trevor, I think my words have spoken quite loudly enough already. I'm focusing on the job, Keir is focusing on the job, and I can say for fact, because I've spoken with him, that both of us are reflecting in our own ways about what putting country first means at a moment like this.
OK. If, by the way, there is a contest, would you be voting for him?
I'm just not going to engage in what the days ahead look like. You know, I have to focus on the moment that I'm in, make the most of the opportunity I have to be a Secretary of State, and I'm proud that every single day that I've been in this job, we have delivered for jobs and growth for our country, and I'm going to continue to do so for every second I have in it too.
Mr Burnham won a big victory on Thursday night. Have you spoken to him since he won? No,
I've messaged him to congratulate him, and it was a quite remarkable victory. And it shows that we can win and beat Reform. Reform ran a terrible campaign, a terrible candidate. They are ebbing. So we do have to seize this opportunity.
They're not ebbing. Their voting actually increased.
Well, they're not... In the system we've got, they weren't able to get across the line. OK. And we've seen also in the polls have been narrowing. And that's some of the that's things that I look at the moment. When you look at the data, the numbers of our politics, we are 8 points behind them. But that has been a narrowing trend, not a growing trend. And also the economic growth figures. We have solid growth in our economy, despite all the challenges, productivity rising in the economy, live trade deals, all these things are going on. And you have to say...
I know the list.
I'm engaging in the challenges that you're putting before me and acknowledging them, but I want to set it in the context of a government that is actually delivering also.
Did Andy Burnham respond to your text?
Oh, no, he didn't. But it was yesterday. He's very, very busy. But don't read too much into these things.
All right. Well, you know, some of us are more sensitive than others. But
it wasn't a text that invited a response. Let me put it that way.
Would you be happy to welcome him to the cabinet table?
Yes.
The cabinet seat he obviously wants is the one occupied by the Prime Minister. How do you think he should go about getting that? Should there be a non-contentious handover by the Prime Minister, or a contest where different points of view are put before party members?
I'm just not going to engage in what the future might hold. You're asking me to make a commentary on what could happen once various stages have gone through.
But it's a reasonable choice. Everybody knows where we're going here. And there are 2 points of view about what should happen now. One is that the party and the country need a stability and there needs to be an orderly transition. And the other is that actually the Prime Minister's still in the game, but in any event, we don't quite know what Burnham and Streeting and all these other people stand for, so let's duke it out and really understand who they are. And I think it's a perfectly reasonable political point of view to say, what would you prefer?
In ordinary circumstances, I think a competition is always advantageous to, as you say, test these ideas in public. I don't yet know what the circumstances of what may or may not unfold in the days ahead. As I said, what I know is that we are a government that is hard at work at governing. Today, on a Sunday, the longest day of the year, we're hard at it, as we are every other day. What might unfold in the days ahead, we will make those decisions if and when they might emerge. But as I said, my priority is to make sure that we are a party of government that is governing, that is able to maintain authority and action in government through difficult times.
I'm not going to ask you about, where you would be on the competition, John, but I want to put something to you about what Andy Burnham has said himself. He said in his 2024 book the following: "As anyone who knows me will verify, I'm more of a spender than a saver. I would much prefer to say yes." That sounds like a man preparing either to raise taxes or borrow his way out of trouble.
OK.
What do you think about that?
Andy has now recommitted himself to the fiscal rules. They have been the bedrock upon which this government has been able to deliver growth, deliver investment into public services, but also to land the stability around the world that has delivered trade deals and influence around the world. So I'm pleased that he has come to the view that the fiscal rules are so important. The fiscal rules weren't in place, I don't think, when he wrote those words in that book. In fact, the world is...
Rachel Reeves had made pretty clear what she was going to do.
The world is a very different place since those words were written, and also Labour is now in government. So all of these things, I think, speak for themselves. And the way that the Labour Party has been able to deliver in government, and I'm not here to say that we got everything right. In these interviews,
I get that.
In these interviews, it's really easy to slip into being defensive. We got a complete hammering in the local elections. I acknowledge that. We have to understand what the challenge is with the project, the purpose of this government that the country decided to give us that kicking over.
I get that,
as well as make it just about people.
But central government's purpose is fiscal stability and all of that. And I guess what you're saying, to be clear, what you are saying is that if Mr Burnham comes to Westminster and he takes a tilt at the leadership, or even if he doesn't, if he becomes a senior person, you are saying to him, we have these fiscal rules for a reason, don't muck with them.
I'm saying to everyone in our whole party, from top to bottom, I don't want to personalise this, that the fiscal rules are the bedrock upon which we have been able to deliver the investment into public services and the growth in our economy, for which we are going to get out of this vice-like grip that the Tories placed us in, with no growth and high taxation. The only way we move forward in a pro-growth, pro-worker, pro-economic development and modernisation will be if we can keep fiscal discipline going forward. It is tough because there is so many demands, and the more success we have in government with growth and also investment, the more people look to us and think that we can invest in lots of different areas. I understand that. But when you are in government, you must learn also to say no to people and explain why you're saying no, but to make sure that the yeses you do give are delivering and demonstrably delivering, and also giving a narrative and a direction to a government.
These two blokes, Starmer and Burnham, aren't the only games in town. There might be others who want to be leader. I take it, by the way, you're not going to be a candidate yourself if there is a leadership election.
As I say, I think my actions have spoken for themselves. I think the way that I put country first right now is to carry on delivering what I'm doing. I've got the job of a lifetime. I'm focused.
But the country might call. They might say, Peter Kyle.
Right now, I know what's expected of me, and I think I know what the country expects on me. I am trying to re-industrialise this country. We're doing so with SMRs. No, you opened the door to this. Doing it so with SMRs that are being built and also being deployed, and we're leading the world. I think we can have an auto output as a country where we are going to double the auto output and the number of cars we're making in this country, at the same time going for those high growth companies which are often in tech. Now, this is something we're delivering. I really want the opportunity to see this through.
I will grant you the advert for your department, but let's just come back to the politics. Wes Streeting, your name's associated with his cause, as it were. He won't win. Would he serve in a Burnham cabinet, as far as you know?
Honestly, I'm not a spokesperson for anyone other than this government. So let me just say, I think Wes is supremely talented. He is a very close friend. And I look and admire the way that he has executed his work as Health Secretary, and the way that waiting lists have come down by 300,000 is a testament to this government and is a testament to Wes. I am simply not going to become a commentator on what may or may not unfold.
But surely, when you, as I understand, you guys go to the movies together. Was it The Devil Wears Prada? Yeah. In the small bits of the event, you might have had a little chat about what might happen in the future. Would you support him if he were a candidate?
Trevor, I've said, and I'm so in awe of the way that you're trying to tease this out of me, and it's so tempting to go into these sorts of conversations. But look, when I say country first, it matters to me. It really, genuinely matters to me. It matters to me more than anything else. Friendships endure moments where we are in these jobs and it is a privilege to be in these jobs, and we have to make the decisions that we do as individuals as to what actually putting country first means in any moment in time.
Well, at the end, I want to ask you about that. I wonder if the point is, irrespective of who's the leader, the problem for you as a party is that your party doesn't want to reduce spending on welfare, doesn't like Shabana Mahmood's immigration reforms, doesn't really, frankly, want to spend a lot more on defence if it means cutting welfare, education or health. The public at large, all the surveys show this, think exactly the opposite. And until any leader can change a party's outlook, you're going to be always in this pickle and you're going to be 8 or 9 points behind reform. Isn't the issue actually, as you say, you want to put country before party, but at the moment, country and party are in completely different places?
In every experience that I've had in my adult life, observing politics and participating in it, the parties which put country first and are willing to challenge their own party membership in order to deliver it are the ones that are most successful in office and actually deliver the transformation that they need. It is a relationship. Overall, the membership look at the way we brought rail into public ownership, the way that we put the Workers' Rights Bill in and we're giving the biggest boost to workers' rights for a generation, the way that we are getting growth into the economy and using that to invest in our public services, which are existential for the Labour Party. We are the party that created the welfare state. So that it is a relationship, and there are things that we've done that sometimes do challenge our membership. But this is a healthy relationship, and for as long as we are putting country first, the membership will be there because they understand why we're doing it, what the cause we're doing it in. The challenges that we have at the minute is because we got clobbered at the local elections, and we do need to reconnect. And that means we do need to have a conversation with our membership about actually how we reconnect with voters. It needs to be more than just changing one person at the top. It has to go deeper.
We will see how that works. Peter Kyle, thank you for your time this morning.
Thanks, Trevor.
Well, the Prime Minister is in his country residence Chequers this morning. He says making time to reflect on his challenges, or that's as Peter Kyle just said. He is considering what it means to put country first, again to use the Business Secretary's words. But it's behind that black door that some very important conversations will be happening in the coming days. Sky's Westminster team will bring you every twist and turn throughout the week. Well, that's the one story in town this weekend, so let's turn to this morning's panel. We're joined by the editor-at-large of The New Statesman, Andrew Marr, the political editor at The Eye, Caroline Wheeler, and the editor of The Spectator, Lord Gove. Now, I thought Peter Kyle seemed rather sad.
An elegiac cello note.
Yeah, very... Yes. And I was also struck by the fact that not once did he say, we do not need a contest. Andrew, what did you make of it?
I've read all my way through the Sunday papers and I've listened to Peter Kyle. I don't think anybody has actually spoken to Keir Starmer and knows quite what he's thinking at the moment. Like most people, I assume that he is going to announce a timetable for his exit, perhaps tomorrow, perhaps over the next week, quite soon. But I don't know, and I think even this kind of conversation on television might make him inclined not to do that. You know, he's a very proud man indeed, and he will hate what he's going through at the moment. But in terms of country, not party, to decode that, I think that means the country does not need or want a 2 to 3 month leadership contest in which the various candidates beat each other up in public, sort of watched by the media. I think the country has had enough of Westminster shenanigans. Andy Burnham has a democratic mandate. That's what makes this different. He has been sent to Westminster by Makerfield to change things. And I think that if he's really thinking of country first, I think the Prime Minister will conclude that the best thing is a swift transition to Andy Burnham, probably without a contest, and he'll make that announcement next week.
Caroline?
I think I agree broadly with what Andrew says. I mean, I think the choice that the Prime Minister faces now is being set out very clearly by some of those that want him to go. They're saying either you can go with dignity now, you can leave and have a kind of very smooth exit, or there can be a really bitter and grubby sort of leadership contest, which will see all of his failings sort of exposed in the public. There'll be lots of criticism about some of the decisions that he made, particularly around, for example, the winter fuel allowance, which has been a kind of lightning rod for criticism of his government. And I think that it will be really, really messy. And I think most of the Parliamentary Labour Party are looking at that and saying, we don't want that at the moment. So I think it's very likely that he will be considering his position and will set out a departure timetable. But, and I do say but, I was with him in G7 in France last week, and he was very bullish. He was very, very determined that he was going to fight on. He believes that he has the mandate, that he was elected by the whole country only 2 years ago, and that he is the Prime Minister that has been given the support of the country, and he should go on. So it will be a really difficult decision for him, I think.
Michael, I'm always accusing you of being involved in these things, but just seriously, I was just struck by Peter Kyle's tone and the seriousness and so, as Andrew says, elegiac in some sense. Talk about the emotions that must be swirling around here.
Keir Starmer will have woken up this morning in the beautiful double bed and checkers. He will have padded downstairs. As he goes downstairs into the Great Hall, he will have looked at all of the Sunday papers arrayed there and their headlines. Then he will have walked into this beautiful room where breakfast will be laid out for him. He'll look at the amazing lawns in front of him. And then he will see Andy Burnham in a chieftain tank on that lawn. And most members of his cabinet will be there in Burnham T-shirts, Burnham Wood, marching towards Chequers.
Very good.
And he will think, how have they betrayed me? And he will be feeling wrung out, angry, but during the next 24 hours, he will realise, if he hasn't already, that there is no future for him. And so I think that inevitably, his thoughts today will be going towards how can he strike the right tone as he leaves office. Because Keir Starmer is many things, but he's not a stupid man. And I think, as both Caroline and Andy indicated, he will not want to put the Labour Party, the government, and indeed his own reputation through the mangle.
So the consensus is that he's going to go. How quickly, Andrew, do you think?
Well, I think I think we'll get the announcement within a few days. He will want probably at least a few weeks, maybe a couple of months of kind of farewell tour, tie up lots of loose ends, try and get his legacy where he wants it. Now, whether he will be able and allowed to do that, I don't know, but he will want it to be both sort of a gentle slope out, not a dive off the end of the pier, and that'll take some time. And of course, Andy Burnham needs time as well. Andy Burnham needs time to decide. Very, very tricky job he's got ahead of him as to who's in his cabinet, in which job. He needs to. He doesn't know half the MPs, or more than half the Labour MPs don't even know who he is. He has to meet them, he has to be introduced to them, he has to think about them, and he has to think, above all, about what his top policy priorities are going to be for the next couple of years.
Well, we can see what the mood music, I guess, around the top of the Labour Party is. Peter Kyle used the term "country first." I'm now reliably informed by the people who do the scoring on this show. He said it 8 times in that interview. So, you know, there'll be an appeal to patriotism and all of that. Caroline, assuming that, you know, Commander Burnham gets out of his tank, what's the first big decision? We'll talk a bit about his appointment, Chancellor and all that. What's he first going to have to do?
Well, he's going to have to send a message, I think, to the PLP about who he is and what he stands for, because I think there are still, as Andrew was alluding to, though, there are still people that don't know who he is. You know, even some of those supporters that are backing him have only had telephone conversations with him. They've never actually met him in the flesh. And he needs to signal to them very clearly where he stands on a number of very important points. You touched upon welfare in the interview with Peter Kyle. But, you know, there are big questions about where he stands on Europe, for example, where he stands on things like the triple lock. You know, there are so many things where he said one thing sort of to one constituent and then another thing to another constituent sort of a little bit later, that he needs to really set the kind of direction for the party, because what we really only know about him at the moment is that he stands for change and he wants to have a kind of more hopeful response to politics. But in terms of the substance, we don't know very much about him at all. So I think actually that meeting with the PLP is going to be really, really significant.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should remind ourselves that he has done something absolutely extraordinary and unprecedented in politics, in that he has fought a very tough by-election with all the media focus on him while trying to think the kind of Prime Minister he's going to be shortly. And he's made mistakes, but he hasn't really dropped the ball in any of that. And so when we allude to, we're not sure about what he thinks about this or that, that's how he's got through a by-election. That was inevitable and necessary for him. I think he knows, broadly speaking, where he is philosophically. And he said that again and again and again, the 40 years of neoliberalism, we have to have a change in direction of the country. And I think he'll be now thinking, OK, I've maybe got 2 years as Prime Minister. It's not very long. The mood of the country remains extremely angry, nervous and uncertain. The economy is fragile. What are the list of a few things that I can show them that I can change quickly that's going to make a difference to their lives? And I think that goes to law and order very quickly, and the shoplifting epidemic, and a sense of lawlessness on the streets. He can deal with, if you can deal with that quite quickly, and possibly the border, and certainly deal with the big defence problem, because we are in a dangerous position in this country, and this government hasn't been able to sort it out, and he must.
I want to come back to his priorities a little later, but let's remember that there is actually an official opposition. It's just gone 9 o'clock. You're watching Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips. In the last hour, the Business Secretary has told this programme that he's had frank conversations with the Prime Minister in the wake of Andy Burnham's by-election win, adding Keir Starmer is reflecting in his own way on what his current challenges might be. Well, Peter Kyle also said he texted his congratulations to Andy Burnham, but he hasn't yet heard back. I don't suppose he's been ghosted yet. Now, to the Conservatives. For once, they're not the subject of all the leadership chatter. They had a mixed bag in Thursday's by-elections. So just before the show, I tried to dissect it with their Shadow Chancellor, Sir Mel Stride. Mel Stride, for the first time in almost 60 years, you won in a by-election in Scotland. But on the same night, you barely scraped 2% of the vote in Makerfield. What happened?
Well, these are two different situations. Like Makerfield has been a socialist part of the country, deeply so for
socialist, that's a bit extreme.
Over 100 years. Well, socialism is
Vote
extreme.
Labour voting.
That's the problem. But Labour voting, OK. So we knew we were never going to be in contention in that kind of area, even in 2019 at the height of the kind of Red Wall, that Red Wall election where we did so well, we weren't in real contention in that particular part of the country. The real story there, I think, Trevor, is how disappointingly Reform did, despite the fact that they threw the kitchen sink at that elections. And I think the question has to be asked now what the trajectory of Reform is. They've come off from a kind of polling high back in the autumn now, several points, and I think their position is softening. But on Aberdeen, you're absolutely right.
So.
Aberdeen South
I think that's a kind of optimistic way of reading Makerfield. Actually, in 2019, if I understand it rightly, you got about a third of the vote in Makerfield. You're down to 2% this week. But Reform actually got a little bit more than a third of the vote. I mean, they basically ate your lunch in Makerfield.
I think the point that I was going to go on to make is that we now live in a world in which tactical voting is increasingly important. And what matters in a tactical voting world is not just where you are in the poll in terms of popularity, but how many people are prepared to vote tactically against you when the opportunity arises. And that is a problem that Reform has. They are increasingly toxic amongst an increasingly large proportion of the population. And I think in the first past the post system across seats in this country at a general election, that will be a major problem for them. Now, in Aberdeen, of course, as you say, great result. There's a first by-election victory for the Conservative Party in Scotland since 1967. And what that demonstrated is that when you start with first principles, as we do as a party, you look carefully at the things that the country really needs, such as energy security, such as jobs, such as energy prices getting under control and so on, and you communicate that effectively to the electorate, then you can get the kind of result that we saw there. And quietly in the background, Trevor, we're also seeing various council by-elections going on. There were two this week in Essex, where the Conservatives took seats from Reform. Okay. So as people are seeing Reform in government at the local level, they are beginning to turn often back to the Conservatives.
I want to come back to talking about the Conservative Party, but of course the news this morning is about the Labour Party and Andy Burnham's return to Westminster and whether that might presage a change in number 10. Now, you guys know more than anybody probably in history about getting rid of leaders and changing prime ministers and so on and so forth. Peter Kyle, the business secretary, said to us this morning he'd had a frank conversation with the prime minister. Can you interpret what that means?
Well, it sounds like it means what a lot of Keir Starmer's colleagues are doing, which is to basically tell him that his time is up. But look, I don't want to intrude on the grief of the Labour Party.
No, but you've got lots of experience of what happens in these situations.
Well, I think what will...
Because you've junked, what, 3, 4 of them?
Yeah, but look, the only reason why you should get into a position of changing a leader is if you think that will fundamentally change something to the benefit of the country. And on the first point about fundamentally change anything, it won't. Because the problem that Labour has is that they are addicted to debt, borrowing, taxing, destroying businesses and so on, and with a backbench Labour Party in Parliament that's not prepared to take the tough decisions, particularly on welfare, to get people off benefits and into work. So we can do things like fund our defence, for example, in an increasingly challenging and uncertain and dangerous world. That will not change by a change of leadership.
Oh, yeah, but actually... Let's be honest, if we can, nobody's watching. You'd prefer to have Starmer there, wouldn't you, rather than a man who took 55% in a by-election on Thursday night?
Look, with Andy Burnham in particular, this is somebody who's flip-flopped all over the place. You've seen it even in this
by-election. Yeah, but the electors apparently like his flip-flopping.
He doesn't apparently understand what the fiscal rules are. He said rather... foolish things about the bond markets in the past. The markets are watching, and I think Andy Burnham taking over...
You could say all that, but he's a winner. He's a winner, and that's your problem, isn't it?
Look, there's a huge difference between winning a by-election and indeed being the mayor of Greater Manchester, a wonderful and important position though that is, and being Prime Minister of our country with all the decisiveness and decisions and sense of direction that you need, and the kind of qualities that I have to say Kemi Badenoch has been showing, which is why she is now the most popular of all the leaders of the political parties, and why, for example, on the economy, we are ahead of all the other political parties in terms of that critical question about who do you trust on the economy. More people say the Conservatives than any other party. And that's because we know what we're doing. We're grown up, we're doing the hard work, we're doing the hard yards, doing the research and coming up with the answers with a plan behind those.
This is a very interesting point. Your party leader is the least unpopular party leader right now. And if the party reflected that, actually you'd be doing much better. But you aren't. You're still something like 10% down on reform. Surely the question you've got to deal with is how does the Conservative Party get back to being the senior party on the right of politics? And even if people do like your leader, actually, the party is an albatross round her neck. You're still not trusted.
So, Trevor, well, on the economy, we are trusted more than any other party out there, OK? So that's simply not true on the general issue of trust. We've got 3 years now to a general election. That is a lifetime in politics, particularly when politics is so volatile. Things can and I believe will change. And the reason they'll change is you have a Labour Party that is palpably making big mistakes around the economy. You have
you want to talk about the Labour Party?
Reform. No, but I'm coming on to us. I'm coming to us. I'm framing your question. So
I can frame my question.
Okay, well,
why don't you just answer it?
I am. With reform, you've got a party that is prepared to go out there and make all sorts of unfunded promises that are totally irresponsible and unbelievable. And where we fit in is we have to be the grown-ups in the room that do the hard work, do the real deep thinking about the difficult challenges that we face, come up with answers that are fully funded and are fiscally responsible, particularly on the economy, and that's exactly what we're doing. And that is why, in the polls, more people are trusting the Conservatives on the economy than any other party.
If you're doing
that is what will bring us through.
If you're doing all this deep strategic thinking and you are going to come up with great policies and all of that, why is the first thing that your leader's been saying this morning after Makerfield that you will never do a deal with reform? Surely it's sensible to decide what you're going to offer to the electorate before you decide who you might or might not work with.
Because we already know two things. One is that reform are economic fantasies. The numbers never add up. They had £140 billion worth of unfunded commitments and tax cuts and so on in their
Speaking as a party of Liz Truss, I don't think you got a finger to point.
As chair of the Treasury Select Committee at the time, Trevor, I had a lot to say about that before it happened, when it happened and after it happened. So I've been very consistent on that. But I lay the same charge, turbocharged version of that charge against reform. The numbers do not add up, and seemingly they don't seem to care about that. They just simply think that if you go out and promise the earth to everybody, somehow that's going to be enough. Well, it isn't responsible. And the second thing is this point about toxicity. Why would we want to get in bed with a party that is going to continuously get hammered by tactical voting because an increasingly large proportion of the electorate do not like populist politics?
OK. Reform's made a lot of noise about defections from the Tories. If what you say is right, it's logical that what's going to happen next 2 or 3 years is that some people who have gone to Reform will be coming back to councillors, ex-MPs and so on. If some disillusioned Reform members want to rejoin the Tories or join the Tories, will you accept them?
Well, that's a matter for the party leader.
But you personally, how would you feel about it?
That is purely a matter for Kemi, and of course you cannot, generalise on the basis of who might be coming forward. So
but you would open the door.
Well, we'll have to see. Look, at the end of the day, we are seeing people... there was a local councillor recently who's come back to and left Reform and says that he's very sorry that he left in the first place, and he was sold all sorts of lies about what Reform were, and then he saw them close up in the way that they work in local government. He doesn't want to have anything more to do with it, and we will see probably increasing examples of that. But it will be a case of a case-by-case basis, and it will be for Kemi to take those decisions, not for me.
Mel Stride, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Well, back to our panel, Andrew, Caroline and Michael. Tories taking a victory lap this morning, but they still haven't solved the Reform problem, have they?
No, but the Aberdeen South by-election was very significant for many reasons, but one above all. Until now, the Reform argument had been the Tories are so toxic that they have a core vote, yeah, that's fine, but you won't get people who don't normally vote Conservative voting Conservative now because of the 14 years. In Aberdeen South, you had people who would otherwise have voted Reform, Labour and Liberal Democrat voting Conservative in order to send a particular message. The toxicity barrier has been breached. Now, one by-election, unique circumstances, some might argue. But the Reform argument, which is we're fresh and we're untainted, the Tories are irredeemably tainted, and therefore people cannot now go back, that argument now no longer holds. And that means that it's game on in the fight for disaffected voters between Reform and the Conservatives in a way it wasn't before.
Just to stick with you for a moment, Michael. Mel Stride's case, though, is that, in fact, that's probably right, but, in fact, it will eventually redound to Reform's disadvantage, because essentially what's happening all over the country is that voters are looking and they're asking themselves two questions. One is, who are the real competitors here? In Aberdeen South, it's Tories and SNP. Which one do I most hate?
Yes.
In this case, SNP, so vote for the Tories. And his case is that in most of the country, when they ask themselves the second question, the people they don't want is Reform.
Yes, so there is a ceiling to Reform's support, and there is a strong... there's an anti-Conservative feeling, of course, still, residually after 14 years. But it's also the case that there's a motivated anti-Reform group. One shouldn't overstate it, and obviously Reform are still the party leading in the polls. But you're right that there are a group of voters who will be motivated to get behind whichever party, and if it's the Conservative, it's the Conservatives, that would stop Reform. We saw a little bit of that in the London local elections, and I think that it will be a feature of a very fractured landscape. Again, Tories mustn't get ahead of themselves. It's just one by-election, but it does mark a strategic moment where the Tory toxicity is no longer the factor that it was.
Caroline, you reckon the Tories are back?
Well, I think it's been really interesting to see this sort of transformation. I think when even Kemi Badenoch came in as the leader of the Conservative Party, there were a lot of people that were kind of writing her off quite early on. In fact, there were discussions about how long she was going to last and, you know, whether or not there was going to be a very quick challenge to her. And that was not that long ago. So it's actually quite remarkable that she has had this sort of this moment where she does seem to be turning things around. Obviously, you can't kind of judge something on the basis of one by-election result. There's still a long way to go. But I think just in terms of the kind of mood music around Westminster is very positive towards her. I think she's taken some really good lessons from her work on the dispatch box. She's now very confident in that role at PMQ. She often comes out as the victor in those discussions that she has with the Prime Minister. And I think she's got a kind of spring in her step. So I think, you know, if you look at the Conservative Party, it is a good trajectory, but, and it is a big but, obviously Reform are still surging in the polls. And when it comes to it, there are going to be a lot of people that are looking at the kind of political situation and thinking, we don't like what we've seen before. We've had Labour, we've tried them. That hasn't gone too well for us. We've had a lot of the Conservative Party. That didn't go too well for us. And they will want something different. And I think that's going to be the real challenge, to actually say to Reform voters that the Conservative Party is not only back, but different to how it was before.
I also think the Conservatives are on the way back, maybe not quite as fast as Michael, but certainly they're going in the right direction. I think what we're not talking about here, however, is race, because I think the other big aspect of this is the competition right to the right of politics, as it were, between Reform and Restore, and the way, in terms of rhetoric and indeed policy, people are being driven more and more extreme in that direction, and people's reaction to that. So, you know, Nigel Farage always says, if you think I'm bad, wait to what's coming afterwards. Well, the barrier between Reform and Restore is splintering. We saw that 7%, I think they got in Makerfield, remarkable for a party which has basically been one man and a social media account. Even when you've got Elon Musk behind him. And, you know, they were going around with T-shirts saying, detain and deport. Detain and deport is the message to people of colour across the UK at the moment. And to their right, of course, there are outright neo-Nazis. And I think as the mainstream electorate look at this and they think, hold on a second, we are slipping towards really, really nasty, really toxic, racialised politics, they will recoil. And I think after the Henry Novak murder, I thought Kemi Badenoch's language was absolutely pitch perfect on that. And that will be a big part of how the Conservatives bring people back into their camp.
Do you think that might taint, do you guys think that what Andrew's just been talking about might taint Reform as well, in some sense? They've also, as you say, been focused on this issue. They said that no more diversity and inclusion and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think it could have an impact. I mean, I thought what was really interesting in the kind of Makerfield by-election was that Andy Burnham had clearly decided not to kind of go on a very aggressive attack against Reform. And I think, you know, he thought that some of the language that was used definitely at the time of the conference, if you remember, when Keir Starmer made that decision to really go for the Reform and sort of basically call them racists, he clearly thought that that was counterproductive. So, I mean, there's definitely an element of that.
And just very quickly, if we think this is all history, we've got the Birmingham mayoral by-election coming up shortly, and it's reported today that Rupert Lode's Restore have chosen as their candidate the mother of one of the victims of the rape gangs.
Manchester, I said. In Manchester, the mother of one of the rape gangs. And that tells you the kind of the context of that contest.
I'm not sure if that's Restore, that's a Reform candidate, but the fact that...
Restore, I said, yeah.
So, we don't know yet, but if that's the case, then clearly it is significant. But, Michael, do you think that this point that Andrew's raising about identity and so on is really significant? People constantly argue here that actually it should all be about class and so on.
I think it's problematic. So, fair play to Reform. In the past, Nigel Farage has made it clear that he acts as the policer of a cordon. That beyond him there are dark forces in politics.
He's what the French would call the cordon sanitaire.
Precisely. And he's been very clear, for example, he doesn't want Tommy Robinson in his party. Good for him. Some of his positions, he can argue, on migration or on DEI have been ahead of the curve. Good for him. But One of the things that worries me is that in the past few weeks he started using the word white. Anti-white this, anti-white that. That seems to me to be introducing a particular phrase that can actually generate greater division. You can be against political correctness, against wokeness. You should do it on the basis of being colourblind. Once you start introducing that language, then, I think you should draw back.
As full disclosure, in fact, I've written about this as part author of the Equality Act, that part of what he described, the Equality Act 2010, as anti-white. And it is not anti-white, it's anti-discrimination. But, of course, this is becoming an issue within our politics. I think it's probably inescapable, though, Caroline, that this is going to be one of the questions for us going forward in politics. And my sense is that politics in Britain still doesn't have quite the language or the reflexes to deal with these identity questions.
No, I think it's a really big challenge because, of course, the more you talk about it as well, the more it brings it into the kind of discourse and the discussion. And that is, of course, what Reform and Restore want, which is why, as I said, I think, Andy was very clever in some ways to kind of try and not let them have that oxygen during the debate in Makerfield. But no, you're absolutely right. The kind of two-tier state is the allegation that's being made time and time again, whether it comes to policing or other issues. And I think that is going to be something that's going to come up in any of the contests that we see coming forward.
All right. Next, we'll have respite from all the palace intrigue with a Brit who swapped Downing Street for California. He wants to be their next governor, Steve Hilton, after this break.
We're trying to see as much as we can. We're in an area that's just been reclaimed. Mr. Zuma, Sky News. People are directly protesting. The whole neighborhood is rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
We're trying to see as much as we can. We're in an area that's just been reclaimed. Mr. Zuma, Sky News. People are directly protesting.
The whole neighbourhood has rallied around her. It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect.
Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking...
Thank you so much.
...trusting us to tell her story.
The battle for number 10.
Sky News has been given exclusive access.
Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget.
Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
It's famously tough for Brits to crack America. The Spice Girls are one of the few who've managed it. Now, Steve Hilton's giving it a go. He used to be a Downing Street man as David Cameron's director of strategy. But following a stint at Fox News, he's now hoping to follow in Arnold Schwarzenegger's footsteps as a Republican candidate for governor of California, with the all-important seal of approval from MAGA. Well, I spoke to Steve yesterday afternoon. Steve Hilton, you had a great gig as a talk show host. What made you decide to give that up to run for governor?
Well, Trevor, it's great to be with you. I mean, most of my career has actually been in business, whether that's running my own companies or working in business around the world. And also I had a gig for a few years working in the government back in the day in the UK. In other words, most of my career I've been doing things rather than just talking. And as the years went on, I loved my time as a host on Fox News, but I felt that I wanted to get back into actually trying to make change happen rather than just talking about it. So I started getting involved in California policy debates. I set up a policy organization, started developing solutions to the problems we have in our state. And one thing led to another, and here I am, looking forward to winning in November and turning our beautiful state around.
Well, this is a curious thing. You say our beautiful state. You're now an American citizen, you know, you're a Californian and all of that. Let me ask you this. We think of California as a Democrat fiefdom, but I was surprised. When I looked it up, 21 of the 40 men, and they're all men who served as governors, California, are Republicans. What does a Republican offer to a state which, frankly, it's a rich state, average income over $80,000?
Well, I can say it in one word, Trevor, change. We've had 16 years of one-party rule in California, where one party has controlled all the statewide elected offices from governor on down, the state legislature, both chambers with a 2/3 supermajority, every big city, every big county, the state Supreme Court with a 6-1 majority. So there's a way of looking at it, which is that California today, the results are what you get when the Democratic Party that's been in power for all those years gets everything it wants without any restraint. And the results are just a disaster. Wherever you look, for regular working people in California, it's a real struggle. And after 16 years of policies that have brought that about, it's time for change.
You were endorsed by Donald Trump in the last stage of this election, the primaries. Are you sure that's an advantage?
Well, it wasn't something I sought. I've known the president for a while. We've had the occasional interview when I was on Fox News, so it was a great honor. I didn't ask him for an endorsement, but I was honored to receive it. And the way I see it is this. The federal government has a big influence on many areas of policy. In California right now, you've got the president and his team trying to do things which I would consider positive, practical things to help California. For example, I mentioned that we have the highest gas prices. One of the petrol, as you would say, Trevor, one of the reasons for that is that we have abundant oil reserves in California, but in the name of climate change, the oil industry is being shut down, and instead we're now importing nearly 80% of the energy that we use. That's actually increasing carbon emissions, as well as massively increasing costs for regular working people and small business. I want to open up our energy industry in California. So does the president. The current leadership of California is fighting that. The argument I make is that it's going to be useful to have a governor that has a constructive working relationship with a president that's trying to deliver practical things that help Californians.
As you know, we had a high-profile by-election in Manchester this week. Did you know Andy Burnham at all during your time in politics?
Yeah, a little bit. We met a few times, and I always got on with him personally. I don't know where he stands in the policy debates that are going on in the UK, or what he particularly offers, but it certainly seems to me that what's happening in the UK is in many ways similar to the situation in California. Somebody sent me a report a couple of months ago about the incredible barriers in the way in the UK of building anything, building housing, building energy infrastructure, other forms of infrastructure, the ridiculous regulatory bloat that make everything so time-consuming and costly. And someone sent it to me, a big investor in California, and said, remind you of anywhere. And that's exactly what we face in California, just a ridiculous, bloated, nanny-state bureaucracy that has led to everything being the most expensive. And in fact, now driving people out of California. People are leaving this magnificent place. Businesses are leaving California. We're rated as having the worst business climate in America. And I think there's a lot of parallels with the regulatory bloat that have caused those problems in California with what's going on in the UK. Whether Andy Burnham is the guy to turn that around, I don't know.
Look, you came to prominence as a Fox News host. So did Pete Hegseth. J.D. Vance had a best-selling memoir turned into a movie. Donald Trump, of course, established his reputation on The Apprentice. Is television in the United States now a necessary stepping stone to political credibility?
I'm not sure about necessary, but it certainly helps when you've got such a big audience to reach in terms of the size of California's electorate that people know you already. In fact, one of the things that's an advantage there is that in another context, if you don't have that way of reaching people and people don't know you, then you have to raise an awful lot of money to reach people. And so I think it's part of the story. You've got to make sure that people understand who you are, where you're coming from, and what you want to do. So I definitely think it helps, but I'm sure it's there are other ways of making it happen as well.
In this country, one of the things that's becoming clear is that there is a distinction between, if you like, the old traditional centre-right and now the populist right, Nigel Farage and his party and so on. That's turning out to be something right across the Western world. What do you make of it?
Well, again, I haven't spent too much time looking at Nigel. I know Nigel. I haven't get on with him very well personally. But in terms of the policy agenda that he's pursuing in his party compared to the Conservative Party, I don't know the exact details. What I can say is that there's a version of this populist movement that I've tried to articulate. In fact, the theme of my show for many years, I used to introduce it every Sunday night with the phrase, "This is the home of positive populism." You see it, of course, in America with the Bernie Sanders movement and so on.
Yep.
They're all aiming at the same point, which is that you've got a big group of people who've been really left out of economic progress and social mobility over many, many years. And so my argument is, let's put forward constructive ways to actually address that.
What do people think about Nigel Farage in the United States? We see a lot of him, we saw a lot of him warming up for Mr. Trump, and he's there a lot. Some say more, he's more in the United States than he is in Clacton. What's his standing?
Well, I can't speak to right now, but I do remember back in 2024, during the Republican convention, just walking around the convention center and seeing a scrum of people, and it was in the actual arena. I remember looking over, thinking, "Who's that superstar that's getting all that attention?" and people coming up and taking selfies. Is it a senator? Is it one of the governors? I went a little bit further along, and it was Nigel Farage. So he's certainly well known here. And as to whether that's an opinion that's broadly shared across the political spectrum, I'm not sure about that. But he's definitely got a positive reputation among many.
One other character you know pretty well, Michael Gove, I read, beat you to the selection for his Surrey seat back in 2005. And then he obviously went on to become an influential cabinet minister, backed Brexit, helped to get rid of Boris and all that. And maybe if you'd won in 2005, history would have been different. As it happened, he's on our show this weekend. Have you got a message for him?
I just want to say how much I appreciated his encouraging messages through this primary campaign. I think it's worked out very well for both of us.
Michael's been advising
I'm very
you.
happy. Well, he just sent me a note saying congratulations and how excited he was to see what's been happening here. But as I say, I think it's worked out very well for both of us. I couldn't be happier as an American, as a proud Californian. I'll even show you my jacket, Trevor. How about that? I've got the US flag on one side, and this is Arnold Schwarzenegger told me to get this jacket. You got the California flag on the other side.
Zigga zigga. Anyway, in just a moment, we're here once again from our panel.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back.
Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They will be all out to war.
But I'm just going to put some body armour on.
I'm Yalda Hakim.
I'm back to Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips. Breaking news on this big morning in Westminster. Sky News understands that the Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has told the Prime Minister that he should stand down. Well, that's quite a turn, given the Business Secretary's words just an hour ago to us. Let's get some reaction from our panel. Andrew Marr.
Well, it's all going one way, isn't it, Trevor? I mean, Yvette Cooper is not the most loyal of the loyal. She's not the last person with a tin helmet in the and a bayonet in the bunker, but she's quite close to that. And if she has turned, I mean, Foreign Secretary, a series of really important cabinet ministers, one after another that we know about, and probably others that we don't even know. I think there is just a moment sometimes. You know, the momentum, the force is irresistible, and that is what is facing Keir Starmer today.
Dominoes collapsing, Caroline?
Well, I think it was sort of billed on Friday that it was the kind of the loyalists were kind of digging in, and it was going to be only the kind of people that were really opposed to Keir Starmer that were going to call on him to set out a departure timetable. But a cabinet minister did say to me on Friday that they believed that the vast majority of cabinet ministers were going to tell him that now was the time for him to make his exit. So I think we're probably going to see more of this today. I think there'll be more people saying that this is the direction of travel.
It reminds me of the last day of Boris Johnson, when I was in my studio at LBC, and you could look out the window, more or less, and you could see the cabinet ministers and the other ministers falling one by one by one, minute by minute by minute. It's beginning to feel a bit like that.
How does this work, Michael? Do they, cabinet ministers, talk to each other before they go?
Yes.
And see them? OK, so what's the drill?
Yes, but there is both organisation and chaos. And the thing is, of course, you've got more than 20 cabinet ministers, and as the Prime Minister might think, I'll talk to Yvette, and then I'll talk to Ed, and each of these conversations will be in silos. But then the individuals are furiously WhatsApping and calling each other to check to see how things are moving. One of the things about Yvette is that she's a pretty plain dealer. She's not associated with any particular faction. She's been an MP since 1997. It's more, and obviously she's Foreign Secretary, so it's more significant than another cabinet minister. Yvette is not by nature a plotter, but she will have talked to other colleagues and she will have a clear sense. She's very close to John Healey, who was the Defence Secretary who resigned, and I think probably from that moment on, if not before, she will have realised Starmer was a goner. The fact that this information has come out, it may well be that people close to Yvette think that she's got to be seen to be on the right side of history, probably not herself, or it may be that Team Starmer, or people in Team Starmer, in despair, are sharing it with other colleagues, and these things percolate. Because the other thing about a conversation is that unless it is just you and the other person and nobody else knows, it will leak. So even if you tell just one other confidant, that person will think, well, the confidence has been shared with me. I trust one other person. And so on. And then, at the speed of a nuclear chain reaction, Caroline finds out, and Andrew is writing an opinion piece before you know it.
Can I ask Michael a question? I wonder whether a conversation between the Foreign Secretary and the Prime Minister is going to be listened into by people on both sides.
Yes, it's possible. It depends how they do it. So normally, in ordinary government business, telephone calls from a Prime Minister to a Cabinet Minister are run through Switch, which is the Downing Street switchboard. So it's not the case that the person fixing the call will listen in, but there would normally be an aide on either side. But it may well be that it's mobile to mobile, but at the same time, Keir Starmer doesn't know if Yvette is on speaker or vice versa. And it may well be that Yvette receives the call from Keir Starmer while she's out with a friend, on her way to church, whatever it might be. So things are moving so fast in these circumstances, and there are so many other players who hear a snippet, and the terrible truth is, as this programme shows, the currency of gossip is trading at a premium at the moment.
We don't do gossip.
Sorry,
we just do news here.
High-quality information.
But this is absolutely fascinating to get an inside look. Though, actually, this gives us an opportunity, Michael, to talk about something that you've been up to. I gather that Sky News has finally fulfilled your ambition and has made you Prime Minister. What's his going... I mean, at the rate we're going, by the way, every single individual in the country is going to get a chance to be Prime Minister, I think, but you've had your chance.
I don't think we should blame Sky News per se for inflicting on the nation this nightmare, but Sky and its wonderful defence correspondent, Deborah Haynes, have developed an idea. Originally a podcast, now a TV broadcast. It's a war game. It's a simulation exercise in which a group of ex-politicians and former civil servants and ex-military rehearse what might happen in the event of a Russian attack on the UK. So I, along with Nicola Sturgeon, the former First Minister of Scotland, Harriet Harman, who plays Home Secretary, Jim Murphy, former Cabinet Minister who plays Foreign Secretary, Penny Mordaunt, former Defence Secretary who plays Defence Secretary, Richard Barrons, who is Chief of the Defence Staff, a very distinguished former general, Kim Darragh, who was our man in Washington. We're assembled
I think one of friends of this programme, Aisha Hazarika's in it too.
Aisha plays the role of Director of Communications. Aisha plays a sort of, how can one put this, humane Alistair Campbell.
On that oxymoronic bombshell, I think we better go to a break and recover our breath. In just a moment, we'll hear once again from our panel. We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big-picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Okay, there's a lot of firing going on.
Can you explain to me why? We're journalists, eh? Let's go. Watch, wait, right, we're going to get in. Right, get in.
We just want to ask you a few questions about your involvement with ISIS. Next step for them quite often is getting on a boat and sailing illegally over into Europe.
Es un solo procesamiento, una sola sacada.
Whoa. Oh my goodness. Whoa. Oh my goodness.
If you weren't affected, you'd be a bit of a strange person.
Turn off the camera. Turn around and go away.
Okay, but
listen, I told you 3 times.
They saw 2 guys, 2 bad people.
There's an absolutely packed dinghy.
that is what it's like. Sometimes you have to put in an awful lot of hard work. It's worth doing. I suppose it is what we do.
Hello, it's 7 o'clock. This is the Kathy Newman Show.
How long's the 5 million going to last, Mr. Farage?
Let's find out. Diane, who would you put in there?
It's not for me to say. I want to see.
Not
you just
yourself,
accused
not
them.
you. Do you ever look at yourself and think, are you the problem?
I do feel sorry for him, yeah.
We'll see what happens. Does it mean, frankly, that you are an irrelevance? Great to have this lovely couple on the sofa.
I know, what a dream team they are.
She's christened the couch.
I'm Tom Cheshire, Sky's data and forensics correspondent. We gather, analyse and visualise data to tell data-driven stories.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist...
My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. And, well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs?
He's coming out! What more do you need?
We're trying to see as much as we can. We're in an area that's just been reclaimed. Mr. Zuma, Sky News. People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood has rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming. It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
Well, back to our panel, Editor-at-Large of The New Statesman, Andrew Marr, the political editor of The Eye, Caroline Wheeler, and editor of The Spectator, Lord Go. Well, look, it feels like the dominoes are falling and we don't need to spend too much time thinking about what happens now. What the runes seem to say is that Andy Burnham will be there pretty quickly. And his first decision, I guess, that will send us a big signal about what he is and what he wants to do is who his Chancellor is going to be. There are lots of names floating about. We hear, of course, Ed Miliband. We hear Shabana Mahmood said not to want it. We hear Pat McFadden saying safe pair of hands, John Healey, etc. Caroline, where do you think he's going to go?
Well, I've actually sort of been thinking about it more today than before, and he was definitely looking at sort of Ed Miliband for a period of time, and that was definitely what some of Andy Burnham's allies were talking about. Now, whether that was because, obviously, Ed Miliband had been quite helpful towards Andy in terms of the Makerfield by-election and the support that he gave him in terms of getting him into that contest in the first place, whether that was a kind of quid pro quo that was being discussed, it's not clear. But actually, the name that I'm increasingly thinking about is actually Wes Streeting. And I think that is partly because you need somebody in that role who is a good communicator. I think that has been one of the failings that we've seen from Rachel Reeves in terms of communicating the kind of message from the Treasury about what they were trying to do. And Wes Streeting is somebody who can communicate with the public. He's also the person that people have talked about as being the candidate that would spook the bond markets the least, if you look at the kind of array of characters that you have. I mean, I removed Shabana Mahmood from that sort of consideration because I don't think she wants the job. And as far as I understand it, she'd made that quite clear to Andy Burnham that she wants to stay in the role that she's got. And it makes quite a lot of sense to keep her in the Home Office. So I actually think Wes Streeting is the one to watch. If it wasn't Wes Streeting, the other name I hear is actually John Healey. But that would be quite an interesting role for him, given the battle royale that he's just had with the Treasury over the defence spending, and he would then be the man that would have to find that money.
And Andrew, what do you think?
I completely agree. I think Wes Streeting made a really interesting speech last week because it was an economic speech and it sounded much more like a pitch for the Chancellorship than for the Prime Ministership.
There's a speech where he talked about progressive capitalism.
Progressive capitalism, but I'm not sure there's a huge difference between progressive capitalism and Andy Burnham's version of business-friendly socialism. I think the two touch fingers. But what was really interesting about the speech, he understands, Streeting, that the economy grows not because some person from number 11 sprinkles a little bit of magic dust over it, but because lots and lots of individual business people, entrepreneurs, creators of companies do really well and get the capital they need to keep expanding. And he's used work by the economist Will Hutton, who's been cut out by Rachel Reeves and the Starmer government, to talk about how you can actually grow the companies in this country. There's sort of several hundred really good AI, pharmaceutical, forward-looking companies on which, as a country, we will need to depend in the next 5 or 10 years, how you're going to get the capital to grow them. And I thought it was a really interesting piece of work. But the crucial question is where Caroline started. You absolutely have to have a Chancellor who will protect Andy Burnham from the bond markets. You have to have somebody who will let him be Andy Burnham while protecting this country from market meltdown. And that is the crucial first question. And I think, personally, Wes Streeting is the guy to do it. But, you've listed a series of other people there as well.
What do you think, Michael? I mean, there's a sort of high-octane option there, which is Streeting, I guess. But then there's the safety options of people like John Healey and Pat McFadden.
Pat McFadden is the standout candidate if Shabana Mahmood stays as Home Secretary, which I think she will. I think Caroline is correct there. On a light note, I think that the best Chancellors of the Exchequer are always Scots. But more...
Don't come on my show and peddle your stereotypes.
No.
Scots are very generous, they're not mean at all.
I knew exactly, but Alistair Darling, stand out at a moment of crisis. More broadly, Pat McFadden is the person with the greatest experience of ministerial office, having been a minister in the past. His comments, which were leaked in conversations with Peter Mandelson. Mandelson used to be his boss, so there's no disgrace in talking to him, or wasn't at the time anyway. His comments, which were leaked, where he said, everyone in the Labour Party is asking me, who can we tax to pay more benefits? Made him very unpopular with the Parliamentary Labour Party, but absolutely the right message for the country and the bond markets. This is someone who is hawkish on public spending, but a Labour man to his core. This is someone who knows how to make machinery of government work, but is not showy or egotistical. The danger for Andy Burnham, if he appoints Wes Streeting as Chancellor, is that he's appointing an assassin. The advantage of appointing Pat McFadden is that you're appointing someone who will absolutely want to make the government work, because he recognises that if anything goes wrong, the whole ship goes down.
OK, well, we've got Ed Miliband, 0 points. We've got Wes Streeting, probably a couple, and McFadden 1 with a reserve of Healy. Can I just ask you, as we're about a minute and a half out, ask you something that I guess bothers me. We're now getting into this issue of 10 living prime ministers. We change them all the time. The King will have had 4 in less than 4 years. His mother had 15 in 70 years. I mean, are we in a problem here, a churn problem?
The entire West is in a problem. I mean, all around the West, we've got countries which used to sort of dominate the world, feel very self-confident about themselves, and shape the world's economy, who are now on the back foot, are declining. Their workforces don't have the kind of living standards they'd hoped for. Their kids aren't going to have a better life than they had all across the West. This is producing huge political turbulence, not just us.
I think politics just moves so quickly now, and particularly even from COVID, for example, when, you know, we were literally on the brink of a, you know, collapse in our economy, and suddenly we had people giving, you know, furlough things and money to people, that people now expect things to be delivered very quickly, and when they're not, they want change. So it's deliverism versus populism.
Michael, 10 seconds. So...
Keir Starmer is the most unpopular person ever to have been Prime Minister, but he's actually more popular than Merz is in Germany and Macron is in France. Andrew Marr is correct. It's a Western disease.
Well, big morning here in Westminster. There's lots more to come as Sky News understands the Foreign Secretary has called for Prime Minister to quit. Stay with us all day. Have a happy Father's Day. And by the way, join us again next Sunday, 8:30 in the morning.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking...
Thank you so much.
...trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
This is Sky News Today. It's 10 o'clock, the headlines. Reports the Prime Minister could step down as early as tomorrow after overwhelming pressure from senior ministers.
I'm seeing a lot of speculation out there. The only thing I can say with fact is that the Prime Minister is hard at work. He is also trying to create the space where he can think and reflect on the political realities and challenges.
US Vice President J.D. Vance arrives in Switzerland for peace talks as Iran and the US trade claims over the Strait of Hormuz. The UK and Europe swelter in the heat with extreme weather warnings due to take effect. And in Sydney, swimmers braved the water to show support for a local mother who was the victim of a shark attack.